you're not satisfied that this person will not offend again, then you won't reprove. You'll disfellowship.
Yes.
And when the person's disfellowshipped, they then can still attend meetings and so on, but under some restriction, is that right?
Under a lot of restrictions.
Yes. And members of the congregation cannot associate with them socially.
Socially or spiritually.
Yes. But the person is still otherwise in the world and can associate with people outside of the church.
Yes.
And you don't take into consideration, do you, how people outside of the church might be kept safe from such a person whom you're not satisfied will not reoffend?
If they were outside the church and they were a close friend, I would tell them.
Well, and how would you know if they're a close friend and they're outside of the church?
No, if they were a close friend of mine.
A close friend of yours?
If I was.
Yes.
If I associated with them.
Well, what about people who are not close friends of yours, others than outside of the church? You don't take any steps, do you, to protect them from this potential reoffending? You don't, do you? You're concerned with the congregation principally, aren't you?
We're concerned with the congregations. We are shepherds of the congregation.
Yes, and you're not a shepherd to those who are not in the congregation.
No.
And as an organisation, in your experience, you don't seek to protect or take care of children who are outside of the congregation.
That's a broad statement.
Well, I can limit it.
Yeah, limit it,
In
please.
your decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation.
Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia?
Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
In your statement, you also say that reporting to the police is a personal decision for a victim and his or her parents if a minor. Is it a personal decision for an elder as to whether to report to the police something that's been reported to the elder which might constitute a crime?
Is it the elder's responsibility to do that? Is that what you're asking?
Is it the elder's personal decision as to whether to report information received by the elder that would amount to a crime?
No, it's not the elder's decision. We respect the right of the person who has been who has been a victim. We reserve her the right, or his right, to do that. But we will do everything we can to support it.
If a different crime, to take the most extreme murder, if you were told that a member of the congregation had killed someone else, would you report that to the police?
We would encourage the person to do that.
Would you do it yourself?
No, I would try very hard not to. Not that I would try very hard not to, but I would encourage the person continually to do that. That's a decision that they need to make.
Well, what if the person wasn't prepared to go to the police, but they told you that they saw the killing happen? What would you do?
Am I being asked on the present day circumstances?
Yeah.
Yes, I would take the action of ringing the branch and getting some legal advice on that.
Do you have any knowledge? You're living in Queensland, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you have any knowledge of the law or legal obligations to report knowledge of crimes at all?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Do you know of any case, Mr. Ally, in which an elder has reported a criminal matter to the police?
No, I can't say that I have.
It reads there, no single witness may convict another for any error or any sin that he may commit. On the testimony of 2 witnesses or on the testimony of 3 witnesses, the matter should be established.
And what's the context for that discussion?
I would like to read it all right through to get the context. I'm sorry.
Well, we won't stop. We won't stop to do that now. But I understand where the Jehovah's Witnesses place their confidence. But do you accept that we have a true conflict between an understanding that we all have of human behaviour, and, as you say, your capacity to believe that she was telling the truth, and what might be, by reason of adherence to that particular piece in the Bible, a conflict?
I put a lot of store by what that principle says, and I have a lot of store also to believe that other things will come out that would provide that, but on the ground of one person's word against another, we cannot act judicially any further.
No, but you appreciate the civil courts can.
Well, that's where there's a difference for the civil court then.
Do you appreciate the civil courts can?
On one person's word?
Yeah.
I'm not... I don't know about the civil court, Your Honour.
You don't know. What I'm trying to get to is whether you accept that there is a conflict between what the Bible's telling you and what your experience as a human being tells you about capacity to accept one person's word against another, based upon your own assessment of what they're saying.
I don't believe that's correct, Your Honour. I really believe that I was saying there, having one witness, you can't establish it beyond any doubt. You can't act on that. If you have another witness to something similar that that person has done, yes, then we've got 2 witnesses. But on the evidence of one, that's my understanding, is that we cannot act. And that's how I
say that in the face of telling me that you believe what she told you.
Yes.
Even though at that point it was word on word.
Yes, we believe it.
Applying scripture as we read it in the best way we can to sensitively integrate with modern society.
But you understand the point. There may well be, and we're in one such area where science has taught us a lot in recent years about sexual abuse and how to appropriately respond to it. But if that science was in conflict with your understanding of the Bible, then the Bible would prevail.
Absolutely, the Bible will prevail. And if I could, Your Honour, that's why hundreds of Jehovah's Witnesses are imprisoned in South Korea, in Taganrog, Russia, Azerbaijan, Eritrea, because they won't budge on a clear Bible principle that will endure forever.
So if the law of the country was to prescribe a mode of behaviour which was in conflict with your understanding of the Bible, what would happen then?
We would apply the words in the book of Acts 5:29 to obey God as ruler rather than men, and as we did here during the Second World War, as thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses did when they refused to come under the Nazi regime. The fact that the government at the time makes a law, Jehovah's Witnesses will always obey Scripture, and that's why we have 28 successful outcomes in the European Court of Human Rights, because we won't budge where there's a clear Bible principle that happens to be in conflict with a government.
You mean it was only when the matter went to court that you understood the serious nature of the events that had happened?
No, it was well before that. It was when the motions we started to go through, when it became something that was clearly a real victimisation of a young person by her parent, that all of us elders then acted very swiftly in dealing with that situation. Now, this may have been a prelude to that. I don't know. I cannot recollect this particular discussion. But
well, we'll come to what you did do in response to what you knew. But is it right to understand that the teaching of your church requires someone who has a disagreement with another member of the congregation to first of all seek to put matters right with that other person?
That would be the first step.
So what BCG says in her statement about her conversation with you and your response is consistent with the teaching of the church. Is that right?
It should be, yes. But
if the response that she says you made, as I understand it, from what you've told me, is consistent with the teachings of the church. That is, no, you have to talk to your father first.
Again, Your Honour, I'm sorry, but I can't recollect that.
No, come back. What she says you said, as I understand it, is consistent with the teachings of the church. That is, you've got to speak to your father first.
Generally, if it was something of a minor concern, yes.
Well, you don't know from this conversation whether it's major or minor. So do I then understand that what you're saying to us is that what she reports you as having said is consistent with the teachings of the church?
I would have to think very carefully on that whole aspect, because if I could remember the rest of a conversation that one might have, then perhaps I can comment, but I cannot recall
I'm sorry,
this having happened.
I'll have to put it to you again. We're just looking at the conversation that she says occurred. Now, you may not remember it, but that's what she says happened. What I want to know is whether that conversation, as she records it from you, is consistent with the teachings of the church, and that is, no, you've got to talk to your father first.
If this did really happen, I'm not doubting that it did, then it would be consistent with myself to follow through and have a discussion with her, and to also approach the parent if it was of something of concern, yes.
I'm lost. She says you said, no, you have to talk to your father first. Now, as I understand it from what you've already told me, a statement such as that by you is consistent with the teachings of the church.
It would be, yes, definitely.
Well, I've chosen my words deliberately, Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
If someone no longer wants to be known as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, they must then dissociate. Yes. Is that right?
Well, again, please, if they want to take the action of doing that, but of course they have total freedom if they don't want to apply to officially be removed as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. They can tell anyone they want that they're no longer a Jehovah's Witness.
All right, so if we action applies to the action taken by a person who, although a baptized member of the congregation, deliberately repudiates his Christian standing, rejecting the congregation by his actions, or by stating that he no longer wants to be recognized as or known as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So is it the case then that someone who no longer wants to be recognized as or known as one of Jehovah's Witnesses must then disassociate?
No, it doesn't say they must do anything. If you read on, you'll see there's a process. This gives the person the right to officially have an announcement made that they're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. But as I already said, if they decide they don't want to exercise that right, they don't automatically come under this provision.
The point we've got to then is that, as I understand it, is that a person who's become inactive and wishes merely to remain inactive is still subject to the organisation's rules and discipline, not so.
If you want to come back, but we don't run a police state where we go and try and force people to follow our beliefs.
Well, the point is, if, for example, the elders visited and found the person to be living in sin in the eyes of the Jehovah's Witnesses, then the elders would, following the process and procedures, discipline that person under the rules of the organisation, not so?
Yes.
Then either they must disassociate or they'll be disfellowshipped.
That would be in that particular case, but I can think of many scenarios where it wouldn't be.
And it's right, isn't it, in the case of both disassociation and disfellowshipping, the remaining members of the Jehovah's Witnesses cannot associate with the disassociated or disfellowshipped person.
Yes, that's according to the Bible principles, which I'm sure you've already read.
And that it's even family members not living in the same household.
That's correct.
Freedom from the organisation on the one hand and friends, family and social network on the other.
I thought I made it quite clear that I don't agree with that supposition.
Mr. Jackson, the reality of the situation is that a person who's been baptised a Jehovah's Witness is thereafter either in the organisation or out of it. Is that not right?
I think perhaps you've got your facts a little wrong there.
Well, I don't think that's correct, because you've accepted already, Mr. Jackson, that a person in the situation you've postulated of merely becoming inactive is still subject to the rules of the organisation.
Yes, but if I can mention, Mr. Stewart, your first proposition you put forward, that they meet someone who's celebrating Christmas. This person is not associating with other Jehovah's Witnesses, not actively trying to change other people and so on. A person such as that is not going to be handled judicially, as far as I understand.
And that's not my point. My point is they may do nothing wrong, but they're still subject to the rules of the organisation in the event that at some point they do something wrong.
I will agree with that, but I don't agree with the sweeping statement they only have the two choices. Well, that was the point I was disagreeing with.
Well, it's right then, isn't it? Because if they don't want to be subject to the discipline and rules of the organisation, then they have to leave by actively dissociating. Isn't that the truth?
That's if they definitely don't want to be, yes. But there are some that do not want to make that active move.
Well, the result then is they're faced with the choice between the freedom from the organisation on the one hand and having to lose their family and friends and social network on the other.
That's how you would like to put it, Mr. Stewart, but I thought I'm trying to say that there are those, some of whom I have heard of, that just fade away and they're not actively Jehovah's Witnesses.
And, Mr. Jackson, you've put it that they have a choice to leave or not to leave. For someone who wants to leave, perhaps because they've suffered abuse by someone in the organisation and don't feel that it's been treated properly or adequately, it's a very difficult choice, isn't it? Because they must choose.
I agree with that.
And it can be a very cruel choice for them not so?
I agree. It's a difficult choice.
And it can be personally devastating because they can lose their whole social network and their families.
That can be the case, yes.
Would you accept then that putting people to that choice through this system of disassociating from them, or shunning as it's sometimes referred to, is contrary to the Jehovah's Witness belief in freedom of religious choice?
No, I don't accept that. I think you're jumping to a conclusion there, but I understand that you have that opinion.
Well, on what basis do you not accept that?
Because right throughout the arrangement with Jehovah's Witnesses, people have to make choices based on their own free will. For example, to be baptized. If someone walks up to us and says, I want to get baptized, we're not going to allow them to be baptized. They have to, first of all, understand the arrangement of Christian living. Usually it takes 1 or 2 years for them to go through both the publications that we have, so that they personally can make that commitment. So that is a choice that they made. Now, we are not forcing them in any ways to remain in our organisation. But a point to remember is that the ultimate standard we believe in is the Bible, and we feel it's good for people to live by the Bible. The fact that many who have been disfellowshipped return of their own free will is an indication that they likewise still believe that it's a good lifestyle.
Mr. Jack, you were baptized at age 13, am I right?
I certainly was, yes.
And there are in fact many Jehovah's Witnesses who are baptized at an age even younger than that?
There have been some I have met that have been baptized younger.
And do you consider that at that age someone is old enough and mature enough to make a decision affecting the rest of their lives?
Yes, I do in some cases. Obviously, there are some children that wouldn't be able to make that decision. And perhaps some would have questioned whether I could make that decision at 13 years of age. But I've worked with people that have been baptized when they were 11, and they have stuck by that determination their whole life.
Well, that may be because they can't leave the organization without leaving behind everyone whom they know.
Anything is possible.
You see, let's take someone who's baptized at a young age and then as lie elsewhere, and they want to choose some other system of belief. They're then still going to be faced with a stark choice that we've identified, aren't they?
That's true.
So on that basis, I suggest to you that that policy and practice of your organization is in conflict with the Jehovah's Witnesses' belief, as you've said it is, in freedom of religious choice.
No, we don't see it that way, but you're entitled to your opinion.
And I suggest also that it's in conflict with the idea of a loving and a compassionate God.
Certainly, that wouldn't be in harmony with the Bible, what the Bible says.